I've said I can't be clearer than that. We haven't changed our position. You can play word games, Michael. Nothing has changed. Stage 3, they are legislated tax cuts. Our policy on that hasn't changed. When a politician makes a commitment before an election, they keep it, and I intend to do just that.
More than 100. That's how many times Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has assured the Australian public Labor wouldn't mess with the Stage 3 tax cuts legislated by the previous coalition government.
Well, we haven't changed our position on that. There's ongoing debate about the impact of those tax cuts.
But then on Wednesday, this happened.
Anthony Albanese promised, assured, guaranteed and confirmed time and time again that he wouldn't touch Stage 3 tax cuts. But now, it looks like he will.
We all knew it was coming. We've been talking about it for days. In some ways, Labor didn't have a choice. Australians, particularly low and middle income wage earners, are hurting. The skyrocketing cost of living is their number one concern. They're forking out more for basics like groceries, fuel and rent. The government had to provide relief, and fast. Doing it by changing the way workers are taxed without messing with how much it'll cost the budget works on paper. It means people keep more of their income at a time when it really matters. But what it represents is infinitely more complex.
This solution that Anthony Albanese has put forward may actually work for him in the short term.
Dennis Shanahan is the Australian's national editor.
It may actually start to draw back some lower to middle income earners who have been attracted by Peter Dutton's promises to help lower to middle income families, people in the regions, people in the suburbs. This is what Anthony Albanese is trying to do, particularly with the Dunkley by-election in mind. It also may work in wedging the coalition, in saying that the coalition is then opposed to tax cuts for people on lower incomes. But in the longer term, there will be deep damage done to the betrayal of faith, which it will be seen as. And it doesn't matter how it is described, it is a broken promise. It's just this idea that the politicians can't be trusted when they talk to you about tax.
Dennis has been covering politics for 50 years, and he says this is up there with some of the major political U-turns he's seen in his time. There was Julia Gillard's promise that Labor would never introduce a tax on carbon.
The final test is not, are you on the right side of the politics of this week or the polls of this year? The final test is, are you on the right side of history?
Hear.
And John Howard's pledge that the Libs wouldn't go anywhere near GST.
No way that GST will ever be part of our policy.
Never ever.
Never ever, it's dead.
In fact, I think this is a bigger betrayal. John Howard, when he said he'd never ever have a GST, actually took his decision to the people. He took it to an election and lost 20 seats. Julia Gillard actually wasn't overturning legislated tax measures. So this is actually a decision by the Prime Minister to overturn long legislated tax cuts. It was designed to remove all those complicating levels and levels of taxation which actually reduced productivity. They reduced people's incentive to actually earn more money. And so this decision is actually overturning not just a throwaway line in an election campaign. So all of this is a complete reversal of a position, and I think it is a much greater betrayal of public faith in an election promise than both Julia Gillard and John Howard's earlier attempts.
The government is between a rock and a hard place here.
These changes, which were introduced 5 years ago, were all part of a long-term plan. And what the government has done, and what Anthony Albanese has done, is conflate the issue of inflation with the stage 3 tax cuts. What he has done is set up a straw man of the tax cuts, saying we can't deliver the tax cuts because they'll be inflationary, despite arguing the opposite earlier and supporting them at the election campaign and since. So what the government should have done was honoured its promise in a political sense, honoured its promise in a policy sense, and looked for other methods to actually contain the cost of living. One of the core issues pushing up inflation is the cost of energy and the cost of transition to renewables. And yet, by talking about the stage 3 tax cuts, the government is diverting attention from that very strong inflationary pressure from growing power bills. The point is, if these were so dangerous to inflation, why are they in effect giving the same amount but to more people if the inflationary effect is from tax cuts? And secondly, it is not addressing some of the other issues that the government should be looking at. The government could have taken so many other steps in so many other areas than just the tax cuts. And as a result, they're trying to take the attention away from their own policy failures in areas such as energy.
Coming up after the break, who wins and loses in the government's Stage 3 overhaul, and why the top end of town isn't actually all that far from the bottom.
So you're ripping off the high end of town?
We're having a meeting. I support tax cuts, and everyone will be getting a tax cut.
Me too. Will I get one?
You will always be looked after, Kyle, because I know that you're struggling.
Most of the criticism of the contentious Stage 3 tax cuts as they were legislated is that they would mostly benefit people earning close to $200,000 annually. Basically, rich people. That was by design. The two previous rounds of cuts, imaginatively named Stages 1 and 2, came into effect in 2018 and 2020 respectively, and focused on workers on low and middle incomes. But the idea that people earning a couple of $100,000 stood to recoup an estimated $9,000 annually through the Stage 3 cuts didn't sit right with some people within Labor and on the left of politics as the cost of living crisis snowballed. Now, that won't happen because the government's been tinkering. Its overhaul of Stage 3 means the 37% tax bracket will live to see another financial year, so people earning between $120,000 and $180,000 will be worse off. And people earning over and above that, up to $200,000 a year, will be taxed at the highest marginal rate of 45%. It's a far cry from the original plan, which was to flatten things out so everyone was taxed at a rate of 30% up to $200,000.
Oh, well, the winners are lower to middle income particularly, Kristen.
James Kirby is the Australian's wealth editor. He's also the host of our finance podcast, The Money Puzzle.
And losers, very clearly and indisputably, are those who are higher earners. And by higher earners, we would mean anyone making more than $180,000, $190,000 a year. I think as this plays out, there will be a lot of examination about this. And for instance, whether $180,000 or $190,000 a year is really a high earner these days when you think about how much people have to pay for homes in Sydney or Melbourne.
What James is getting at here is that this could be an opportunity to rethink our definition of what makes someone rich in this country.
On a bigger picture, if you like, it continues an unfortunate practice in the tax system through all governments, which is that the people who are earning, and the more you earn, the more this applies to you, you are the meat and the sandwich in the tax system. If you're older or richer and you own your house, and you have lots in super, the whole system tilts towards you. So, it's the earners that get the sharp end of the stick, and this is more of it.
The tax shake-up is already being felt elsewhere in the wealth management sector too.
I can tell you that financial advisors, they have been telling their clients and customers for some time now that this is going to happen, and plans have been made on the basis of this, and deals have been done and acquisitions have been made, and it isn't going to happen as it was promised.
James Kirby is the Australian's wealth editor and Dennis Shanahan is our national editor. You can read their takes on the government's big tax backflip right now at theaustralian.com.au.